Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what's this week's game?
We're trying a little something new this week, with both of us covering one game that has 2 totally distinct soundtracks. The Blue Blur's debut away from a cartridge that features time travel in order to secure a good future. 1993's Sonic CD.
Yeah, it should be a fun, different episode this week. Shout out to DVD Smith for the idea. It was months ago, I feel like, at this point. But with Sonic Origins releasing this week, it is finally a good time to talk about Sonic CD, on top of all of the Sonic games we've covered. But normally we talk about 2 games on this show. If you're new, we each bring one game to the table and talk about its composer and the critical tracks on the soundtrack. But because of Sonic CD's strange circumstance, that's the theme this week. We're talking about 2 soundtracks that are part of Sonic CD and its history.
I think I've known for a long time that Sonic CD had a different soundtrack in the US than in the rest of the world, but I've never known why. So that's mostly what I'm looking forward to learning today.
It was some fun research. I'll give it that for sure. And it's going to be fun also to talk about, games that were playing on CD-ROM in 1993. So it's like way different than, video game music at the time that you think from like Super Nintendo and things like that. So should be a lot of fun. But first, Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Well, my week of gaming was basically a lot of Steam demos. A lot of them. Just a few standouts that come off the top of my head. Melatonin is a game where the developers said, I just want to make Rhythm Heaven. And then they just made Rhythm Heaven.
Awesome.
So I'm looking forward to that. It's stuff like Potion Permit, which was another Stardew-like, but you run basically the clinic of a small town where you make potions to heal stuff and all that. Ghost Song was a Metroidvania that was basically what if Metroid, but with the aesthetic setting of Hollow Knight. And it's very good. And yeah, a lot of demos. I played, I think, 28 that ended up being talked about on my Twitter, and I played a lot more than that just kind of sucked. A lot of those. Other than that, I started the Somnium Files Nirvana initiative, and I know what you're saying. That doesn't come out until Friday. Yep. I was given the privilege of getting a review copy for Steam so I could help out with some of the NWR coverage, though I admittedly don't feel like I was that much help, but it did give me a chance to go ahead and start the game a little bit early. I'm only a couple hours in, but I like it so far. Uchikoshi is a really weird dude.
He sure is. Well, more on that next week.
Oh boy, more on that next week. But that's basically it. I finished replaying Paper Mario. It's a fine game. It's fine. It's good.
Well, good. And people can go to your Twitter at StringPixel to hear more of your thoughts on the different Steam Next Fest demos. So that is quite the thread indeed. Well done there for getting through all of those. I only continued a little bit more of Mass Effect 3. Let's see. I rescued Eve, and so Tuchanka has now opened up as a priority mission, but I'm still kind of fleshing out some of the side missions. Cleared Grissom Academy, did some stuff on the Citadel, set up some more side quests in that regard, like, oh, hey, Miranda, oh, you're setting up a side quest later down the line, okay, well, see you then. So things like that. It's always good to just play some good old video game comfort food that is Mass Effect. So yeah, not too much there otherwise though. Also, nothing really on the composer follow-up news front, so let's get to playing video game music hurdle. over at vgm-hurdle.glitch.me. They have the spin-off of the Hurdle game where every day they have a video game music track, and you have to try guessing the track in increments of 1 second, 2 seconds, and so on, up to 16 seconds. So far, when we've played on the show, we've been able to guess it within 1 second every time. This is not always the case when we play by ourselves every day, but we play on recording days. So, Joe, are you ready to listen to this video game music track?
I am. Let's keep this streak alive, maybe.
Fingers crossed. Let's hear this first second. Well, come on. How do we get these very easy tracks? Not only one that we've gotten from Final Fantasy VII before. It's a shame they couldn't put it in the remake, but yeah, this would be Genova.
It sure would be.
To the point where in Final Fantasy VII Remake, they had the big pop-off moment where this music sample comes in and, like, fans, even if you just know video game music cursorily, you're supposed to know this intro to this battle track. So, yeah, good to have this one included. But, come on. We want some harder ones on the show, I guess.
A challenge.
Although, last one with Scott Pilgrim, that was pretty tough last week, so...
Yeah, we almost didn't get that one. I know a couple weeks ago there was one from Toontown, and I never would have gotten that. Where are those on recording days?
That's right, I forgot about that one. Though it would be tough to just totally strike out on a recording day. So, hey, you know what? We'll keep the streak alive. Let's talk about Sonic CD. In what's going to be a different structured episode. If you're a regular listener, you know that I would present a game, or Joe would present a game, and then we have a little break in between, and then the other host here would present the other game. Well, it's a little different here. I did the research behind the development history and all that, so we're going to talk a bit about Sonic CD with me presenting, and then we're going to pass it off to Joe to talk about his composer, because he covered the Japanese and European soundtrack, which is all one thing. Then we'll take a little break, and then I'll cover the American composer and soundtrack. You'll get it. It makes sense. It'll be nice and easy. So, obviously not the first time that we've talked about Sonic the Hedgehog on Original Soundchat, and many of his games have been covered, including Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in Episode 9, Sonic Adventure 2 in Episode 17, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 for Episode 76, Sonic Mania for Episode 106, Sonic R for Episode 116. We did both Sonic Generations and Sonic Colors in a Sonic-themed episode in Episode 137. Most recently, Sonic 3 and Knuckles in Episode 159. And now this is Episode 178 of the show, in which we get to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog CD, or more colloquially known as Sonic CD, which released in Japan on September 23rd, 1993, for Sega CD. The CD-based enhancement that went on top of the Genesis or Mega Drive. Europe would not get the game until October 1993, so just only a few weeks later, and then North America would have to wait until November 1993, so a couple months after that. There was a PC port in 1996. It was brought to PlayStation 2 and Nintendo GameCube as part of the Sonic Gems collection. Honestly, it was the standout of that collection in 2005, where the other big installments from that were Sonic the Fighters and Sonic R.
Yeah.
And then a smattering of other smaller Sonic games and Vector Man. And you could also unlock the first 3 Streets of Rage games. So there's a Streets of Rage tie-in from last week when we talked about Streets of Rage 4. And then in 2009, independent programmer Christian Whitehead, or also known as The Taxman, he presented a remaster proof of concept for Sonic CD to Sega, and this would eventually be released in a final form in December 2011 for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, iOS, Android, and PC. Fun fact, it was too big for WiiWare. Remember WiiWare? And its attempt to get into downloadable arcade-sized games. It was too big for that. Anyway, Christian Whitehead would go on to become one of the driving forces behind Sonic Mania. And this 2011 remaster of Sonic CD will have some performance enhancements to it, I'm sure, as it'll be included in the package of games known as Sonic Origins, which launches worldwide this Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, which is Sonic's 31st birthday, for all major platforms. Sonic CD, or Sonic the Hedgehog CD, is developed and published by Sega. What is Sonic CD? It's a 2D side-scrolling platformer. You know, kind of like what Sonic was in the early 90s. You run and jump through levels quickly as the blue blur, you collect rings and defeat robot enemies, as well as the boss at the end of each major area. While previous Sonic games are broken up into big areas known as zones, with the levels inside each of those areas are known as acts, Sonic CD is broken up into 7 rounds, with 3 zones inside them. Not confusing at all to use the same word of zones, but the first 2 zones in each round are a lot like Sonic 1 and 2's acts, but the third zone is just a short run-up to the round's boss. We mentioned how Sonic CD has time travel involved. And it's a little confusing. Honestly, even as someone who had tried playing the game, I had no idea how the whole time travel thing works and the good and the bad future and all that. Had no idea until diving into this research. Maybe that's a point of, a game like that has bad conveyance if you have no idea how to work it while you're playing. Or you need a game manual or something like that. Anyway, let's talk about time travel in Sonic CD. So in zones 1 and 2, you start in the present of the round. And throughout the level, there are time warp signs that exist that say either past or future on it. To travel through time, you must walk through the respective sign, and it kind of triggers with a voice clip that says past or future. And then you have to run at top speed for a few seconds, and you'll be kind of glowing and glistening, and then you'll trigger a cutscene where you'll travel through time and then end up in either the past or the future. If you're in the past, you can go back to the present by going through a future sign, or similarly, if you go to the future from the present, you can go back to the present by going through a past sign. That makes sense, right? Anyway, the point is, in zones 1 and 2, in each of those zones, there is a Robotnik robot generating machine that you have to find and destroy in the past. And so, when you do so, you will secure a good future for the zone. But if you miss it, or just decide not to do it, it will cause a bad future. You can also travel to the future, of course, from the present and see what the future is like in the midst of that zone. Granted, if you haven't triggered that Robotnik machine yet, you'll go to a bad future if you go right there. Or if you do that and then you decide, let's jump back to the present and then the future, it's a nice, easy, good future. See, the good future, there aren't any enemies. There really aren't any hazards. It's a nice breeze. But if you go to the future and it's a bad future, it's more difficult. Enemies are running rampant, etc., etc. The ultimate point is you need to secure good futures by destroying each of those Robotnik machines. Secure good futures in zones 1 and 2 in order for zone 3 to have a good future. See, zone 3 takes place and starts in the future no matter what for that boss fight, but you need to secure the good future in 1 and 2 to get the good future for zone 3. In order to get the game's best ending, you need to secure good futures in all of the zone 3s in each of the game's 7 rounds. There's also another way to secure all good futures, and that's by collecting all 7 time stones. Think Chaos Emeralds, essentially. When you finish a zone with more than 50 rings, there is a special stage that you trigger by jumping through the goal, almost like you do in the original Sonic the Hedgehog. And then Sonic accesses a special stage in which he must destroy 6 UFOs in a pseudo 3D environment within a time limit. Kind of think the special stage in Sonic Mania. It's pretty similar to that, except you're jumping and destroying floating UFOs. If you do this successfully within the time limit, you earn a time stone, and collecting all 7 time stones gives you automatically all good futures and the best ending. Was that confusing enough? I think that makes sense. It's basically just make sure you go to the past, destroy the Robotnik robot machine, and that way you secure the good future, or you just do all the special stages. And that's the gist of the good and bad future.
I mean, it makes as much sense to me as I figure it can.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair for a game in the early to mid 90s, I suppose. The plot for Sonic CD is summarized as such, because there's like an opening movie with some neat animation, especially for the time. But here we go. Quote, Dr. Robotnik steals Little Planet over Never Lake, a place where there is said to be special stones that are capable of time travel, known as the Time Stones. Dr. Robotnik chains Little Planet down and starts converting the world into his personal fortress. Sonic arrives on the scene to stop Robotnik from taking all of the time stones that will allow him to manipulate time and conquer the world. The big question is, can Sonic stop Dr. Robotnik and secure all good futures? So Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Sonic CD?
I have never played it. I'm pretty sure I didn't know it existed until Sonic Boom was in Brawl. And even then, I'm sure it took a little while for me to know that was a game. And that's basically it. I know of Metal Sonic. That's all.
I tried playing Sonic CD. I had heard good things about it, and I bought it on Xbox Live Arcade when they had, old Sonic games for cheap. So it must have been early in the 2010s when that Taxman remaster came out. And I didn't like it as much, especially for someone growing up with the original Sonic the Hedgehog games. And as I suggested before, the game doesn't really do a good job explaining what you need to do to secure good futures, or what is a bad future? What's a good future? What do you have to do? So, yeah, didn't like it as much. Only got through a few rounds, I suppose. Didn't beat it. But it was really interesting to learn about this because I was generally familiar that it had 2 different soundtracks. Wasn't too sure of why or how different they sounded. So this should be a good enlightening episode for those who are like me, who you're generally aware Sonic CD existed, but you want to learn more about what's going on with it. If you played Sonic CD, I'm sure all of it inside and out, what tracks from which version are your favorite, which soundtrack you ride or die with. I'm sure there are people. It's a big, cult following game where it's very devoted fans and people who think that Sonic CD is the best Sonic the Hedgehog game. I get that. I understand that. It's not my favorite, but I was interested to maybe play it in the Sonic Origins collection when I do get around to trying that. So
maybe that one will have a digital manual.
Maybe. And maybe I'll have, some instructions on what you generally need to do. Or if there's I don't know if Sonic Origins has save states or rewinds like that. That could make it interesting. But yeah, so let's learn about Sonic CD. And in order to do that, we have to start with 1991's Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a huge success, and it puts Sega on the map in the console manufacturer space. How do you capitalize with that? Well, it doesn't help when lead programmer Yuji Naka, he's upset with Sega of Japan's rigid corporate policies, so he, along with several members of the Sonic team, moved to the United States to develop Sonic the Hedgehog 2 with Sega Technical Institute.
Always comes back to Yuji Naka. Always comes back to Yuji Naka.
Yeah, he's got some stories about him, especially recently with Balan Wonderland and all of that. But yeah, so Sega Technical Institute based over in the San Francisco Bay Area. And meanwhile, back in Japan, Sega is planning to release the Sega CD add-on for its Genesis or Mega Drive. And they wanted a Sonic game that would demonstrate its more advanced features. So Sonic's character designer, Naoto Oshima, would become Sonic CD's director. And the remainder of the team was comprised of Sega staff who had recently developed The Revenge of Shinobi, Golden Axe 2, and Streets of Rage. The team built Sonic CD using the original Sonic the Hedgehog code as a base, which now it makes sense why Sonic in Sonic CD looks a little more like he does in the original Sonic game than he does in Sonic 2. But the game was conceived as an enhanced port of Sonic 2 for the Sega CD. At this point, it was codenamed Super Sonic and would feature additional levels, a fully orchestrated soundtrack, sprite scaling effects, and animated cutscenes. Sounds amazing, right? Well, Sonic 2 didn't do too well in Japan. Apparently, meager sales, as well as the team having its own vision, resulted in the reworking of the port, which I found really interesting. I knew that it obviously did really well in the United States, but I didn't think that like Sonic the Hedgehog 2 did poorly than expected in Japan.
Yeah, that's surprising to know, actually. I don't think I knew that either.
So Oshima cited Back to the Future as an influence on the time travel mechanic and wanting to put that in the game. He had hoped for the time periods to change instantly with a sonic boom effect, but the programmers argued that this was impossible, and they produced a loading sequence instead. That's why you get a little cutscene of Sonic kind of running and doing the time warp again. Would it be possible today with solid-state loading? Sure, but this was not the case with long-loading CD-ROMs at the time. But think of this, though. The developers designed 4 variants of each stage. That'd be the present, the past, the bad future, and the good future. Now, if you think Zone 1 and Zone 2, with 4 variations for each of those, in the 7 rounds, that's 56. Plus, you have one zone, Zone 3, the boss fight, with 2 variations with the bad and the good future, plus the 7 rounds. Okay, all right, you add 14 onto that. That would be 70 level design variations, which is a whole lot. And as a result, the total game data of Sonic CD is 21 megabytes compared to Sonic the Hedgehog 2's 1 megabyte.
That's a hell of an increase.
Not only is it a hell of an increase, it's also crazy to think that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was only 1 megabyte big.
Man, remember those days? I don't even know if a download of Sonic 2 at this point, like if you go download one of the ports, I don't even think that's 1 megabyte.
Probably not. You got to think like, sprites and resolution, and no, absolutely not. It'd be certainly bigger than 1 megabyte. But to get it on that cartridge and make it work, yeah, there you go. Sonic CD introduced Metal Sonic and Amy Rose to the franchise. Interesting to think of how the team went about designing Amy Rose, a female hedgehog that was infatuated with Sonic. Many people contributed to the design, but ultimately, quote, her headband and trainer shoes reflected Oshima's tastes, while her mannerisms reflected the traits that artist Kazuyuki Hoshino looked for in women at the time. Ick. Gross. I'm glad that we don't think of female characters in games in such stark ways anymore.
Most of the time.
Generally speaking.
That's some real corner Yoko Shimomura in the office to tell her about how great Chun-Li's thighs are. Energy.
Also big David Cage creepy vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, didn't need to know that about Amy Rose, but there you go. That was discovered in the research. Also, one of the rounds was cut due to time constraints because data file names would suggest that it would have been the second level of the game between Palm Tree Panic and Collision Chaos. And yes, the main reason why we are talking about the game today is that there are 2 soundtracks. There's the original soundtrack that was for the original Japanese release of the game. Europe also got this Japanese release of the game, and so therefore if you play the European, the PAL version of Sonic CD, you would get this Japanese soundtrack. And then an entirely different North American soundtrack. I say entirely, but it's also like not perfectly entirely because of some weird things. We'll get there. We'll talk about it. It's cool. Sonic CD reviewed well with critical acclaim. There was no aggregate average available, but most reviews seemed to be in about the low 90s. Reviewers praised its exceptional size, music, and the time travel feature, although some also believed that the game really didn't use the Sega CD's capabilities to its fullest, and that's fair. In a time when a lot of those games are using a bunch of full motion video, it's just like, oh, there's an opening and an ending cutscene, and that's it? Otherwise, it's like a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog assets doing bigger and cooler things. And, of course, yeah, the music is wow, so much better than the original Sonic the Hedgehog game. So, some consider it to be among the best games in the Sonic franchise, though it also has a cult following due to the low install base of the Sega CD. Not everyone got to play Sonic the Hedgehog CD. Much more people played Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and so you got that disparity there. And then also, what did better? What do we kind of continue with going forward? Oh, more people played Sonic 2, it sold better. Well, let's continue with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And then that caused the split with STI where, well, back in Japan, they wanted to make Sonic 3. So STI in America, you make Sonic Spinball. We talked about that in our Sonic 3 and Knuckles episode. That's a whole fun time. How much did Sonic CD sell, though? 1.5 million copies. And it makes it Sega CD's best-selling game of all time. So it kind of gives you an idea there. Also, Game Awards were a little different than they were today. So Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded the game the best Sega CD game of 1993. Great. I don't know how many there were. Also, ones that were that big of a claim, but you didn't have really BAFTAs or really, I don't think the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences were up and kicking at that point. So it's a different time that was really driven just by different game magazine publications.
We get into it sometimes when we talk about like an NES game, where it's just like, yeah, there were no award shows then. Games were still like a hobbyist thing.
Yes, a burgeoning media form.
EGM, that's where you're going to get it. That's it.
And it was one of the bigger ones at the time, so I think it's a good indication. It is widely regarded, though, as one of the best games, if not the best game, on the entire platform, looking back on it. The legacy, though, Amy Rose and Metal Sonic would appear rather regularly in future Sonic games. Amy became a playable character in 1998's Sonic Adventure, while a reimagined version of the boss battle against Metal Sonic was a standout moment in 2011's Sonic Generations. Also, you would get certain moves from Sonic CD that would come back in Sonic Mania. Had some definite inspirations with the development and creation of that game from 2017.
And Metal Sonic is the main antagonist of that Sonic OVA.
Oh, yeah.
That is like really weird and has the president's daughter who wants to bang Sonic. It's weird. It's a weird movie, but Metal Sonic's pretty cool in it, so. Alright. So, like Peter said earlier, we are going to cover 2 composers for this game. And we're going to start with the Japanese version, which was my responsibility. And the composer we're going to talk about for that version is Naofumi Hataya. Now, there's not a lot of information on Mr. Hataya. He was born on November 13th, 1966 in Saitama, Japan. He graduated from Rikko University, and in hopes of improving his musical skills, even though he had not really planned on getting a career in music, he nevertheless began searching for a job in a company that had something to do with music, and somehow this led him to Sega, where he got a job in 1990, where his first work was the quote-unquote famous 8-bit version of Sonic.
It's the one on Game Gear.
Yeah.
I know very little about it, but it is part of that Sonic Gems collection as well.
Yeah, that was his first assignment when he joined Sega. I believe he still works in the industry, as far as I can tell. He might still be at Sega. I didn't find any evidence that he went freelance like most of the old school composers we talk about. He is married to Tomoko Sasaki, who is not only one of the composers behind Nights into Dreams and Ristar, she is also the voice of the Chow in Sonic. Except for like this one pocket of time in which I guess the Sonic X voice actor was given the role, and then after a few years they went back to Tomoko Sasaki. So, yeah. And I'm surprised there's not a huge amount on him, though granted, I think this is kind of the case with most of the Sega in-house composers we talk about. He's done a lot. He is credited with doing music or sound effects on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Kiss Shot, Sonic CD, Golden Axe 3, Virtua Racing Deluxe, Outrunners, Sega Rally Championship, Nights into Dreams, and Christmas Nights into Dreams.
Christmas Nights into Dreams?
Oh, did you not know that was a thing? Oh, yeah.
Sure didn't.
I think it was like given away in a magazine in Japan at some point, and it's just Nights, but reskinned to be Christmas, as far as I'm aware. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It was like a promotional thing. He was an advisor on Sonic R. He did the Saturn conversion of Resident Evil, which I didn't even think about the fact that that would have needed like a full audio conversion to go from the PS1 to the Saturn. He did most of the music for Space Channel 5, as far as I can tell, Daytona USA, Sonic Heroes, Samba de Amigo, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games, 2009 specifically, Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure, which is a game I forgot about until I found it on this list, and that's probably a game we'll talk about at some point.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sonic Lost World, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games Sochi 2014, Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, Sonic Forces. He apparently did at least some work on Shin Megami Tensei Liberation DX2, which I believe was the mobile game that recently shut down. He did sound effects for Judgment. He did the music for Space Channel 5 VR, contributed some to Puyo Puyo Tetris, and his most recent credit, according to Moby Games, is on Sakura Wars in 2020. So he is still working in the industry, and like I said, as far as I can tell, he seems to still be an in-house composer for Sega. In terms of the historical development research for this version of the soundtrack, it was worked on not only by Naofumi Hataya, but a second composer also worked on it by the name of Masafumi Ogata. They had both worked together on that Game Gear version of Sonic 2. And it features 2 vocal tracks, both performed by vocalist Keiko Utoku. These are the first vocal tracks in a Sonic game, which is really interesting to think about when that is a series that has kind of become synonymous with vocal tracks. I can't think of a single Sonic game in the past decade that doesn't have some form of vocal track in it somewhere.
Yeah, usually a staple, especially with the main title.
Yeah. Influences on the soundtrack for this game include apparently house and techno music just in general, but more specifically, the groups I saw named were C+C Music Factory, Frankie Knuckles, and the KLF, none of which I have ever heard of.
Oh, you've heard of CNC Music Factory before.
Have I?
Yeah, they did Gonna Make You Sweat. Everybody dance now. Bam, 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 bam. That's CNC Music Factory. Yeah.
I did not know. I don't think I ever knew who did that song. I just know it. Well, you learn something new every day. So for the 5 critical tracks, let's jump right in with one of those vocal tracks. This is the opening track It is called Sonic, You Can Do Anything.
Hey, Excalibur! It's not that bar. What do you mean? Give and take. Going home. Side zone. Check it out, eh? Live alone. Leather legs. Getting in place. What do you get, say? Back it. Zoom room. Cosmic zoom. That's up, Jay. It's Sonic Boom. Sonic Warrior. Sonic Warrior.
You are with me at a hand. You've got the power to save the land.
Take a little chance. Slip on through. You got smart no matter what you do. You gotta do for you. Sonic Warrior. Sonic Warrior.
The power is in your mind to save the planet.
So this song was composed by Masafumi Ogata, vocals again by Keiko Utoku, and Casey Rankin. Obviously, this is the opening song, like I said. In the US version, as we'll get to, it was replaced with the song Sonic Boom. What a song! Parts of it, when I hear it, I'm like, this feels like something that would play during a race in Initial D, almost. Like, it's skirting dangerously close to Eurobeat in a lot of places. These vocals are really weird. Like, really weird. When I saw the title, You Can Do Anything, this is not the kind of song that immediately came to mind.
Oh, yeah, because I've always known it as Toot Toot Sonic Warrior.
It's so weird. But I dig it. It is nothing like what I'm used to Sonic music sounding like now. Hell, it's nothing like anything else in this game. But it's cool, I guess. Weird, but cool.
Let me impart some wisdom on who Casey Rankin is. So this man was best known as being the lead vocalist for the Japanese rock band Shogun, which was the first Japanese-American collaboration of its kind and was very popular in the 80s. Joey was born in Kansas.
Wait, what? Is this My Lotus Juice?
Well, here's the deal. His promotional picture, at least on the Sonic fandom page, he's a very Kenny Loggins-looking white man with a guitar.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, digging into a little bit of rap there, Casey. It's something, all right, and it gives this song a whole vibe of an energy.
An energy is certainly a way I'd describe it. I don't know what kind of energy, but it's an energy. Alright, let's get into a few stage tracks, which is where I think this soundtrack really, really shines. And the first one is Quartz Quadrant, Good Future. As you can tell from the title, I assume, not only does the level design and aesthetic sort of change between the present, the good future, and the bad future, but the music changes as well. And this is for round 4, composed by Naofumi Hataya. It is described as a busy place with conveyor belts and platforms. It is an underground, golden-colored city that is possibly made of quartz in the good future. I think I put this on here because it's another song that's just like, you don't hear stuff like this in Sonic. Like, especially not back then. It feels really airy, but still keeps up that sort of speed pace. I don't know if that makes sense, but like that's the way that I moved to describe it. And it just felt different to me, so I figured it was a good place to start here.
Quartz Quadrant on the whole seems to be the level or the round that between the Japanese and American soundtracks like had probably the best collection of songs. Like people like didn't seem to dislike any of them. Like it's like, oh, they're all good, but then it's just like, well, what do you like more? And yeah, this is a nice kind of, I agree, airy is a good way to describe it. Pretty different from what you'd hear in Sonic games overall. but also a good indication, if it weren't obviously clear with You Can Do Anything, of what's possible to be played on a CD-ROM, like just much higher audio fidelity, better sounding instruments that still are probably coming from synthesizers. I don't think we're at the money and all that stage of recording live orchestras, but you're taking like the best synthesizers and kind of being able to process them more authentically than just say, oh, plug it in through ones and zeros through MIDI. And so it definitely sounds a lot better that way.
But who cares about that? Let's get to the real stuff. I can't say the word I wanted to say, but that's fine. You know what I wanted to say. This is my favorite track in the entire game, and basically the reason why I ended up on the Japanese side. Critical track number 3 is Stardust Speedway, Bad Future. The song was composed by Naofumi Hataya. It is the music for Round 6, which is described as a highway adorned with musical instruments above an enormous city. In the bad future, Stardust Speedway has become a corrupted, polluted, dystopian city underneath a large electrical storm with a completed statue of Robotnik in the zone's center. This song is awesome. It has a really, really cool pace to it. And of course, the main reason I know it is because this is the song that would be rearranged to serve as the boss fight music for Metal Sonic and Sonic Generations, which is an even better version of this song. But this version is still just really, really cool, and it feels a lot closer to modern Sonic than, like, what I know Sonic to be in 93. Like, this feels like you could put this song in Sonic Adventure and I wouldn't bat an eye. It's just so cool. It's such a cool song.
100%. Like, if I'm picking one track across both of these soundtracks to listen on loop or say it's my favorite, it's this one for sure. And I think that is, because of, our familiarity with it in Sonic Generations, in Sonic Mania, but it all goes back to being the boss fight against Metal Sonic. From what I read, is described that like boss fights in Sonic CD, they don't take like the 6 to 8 hits that the regular Sonic the Hedgehog games would take. There's a little more to do in the boss fight, but you end up with, fewer hits on Robotnik, Metal Sonic, whoever. And so for this to be a race against Metal Sonic, it's a totally different boss fight than all that. But yeah, such a cool vibe, and the vocal, but the piano that comes in and it's so jazzy and so cool. The one interesting thing for those like us that are familiar with the newer interpretations of this song, there is that vocal sample that does the turn it up, good God. And like that comes from the present interpretation of Stardust Speedway. Though that's a totally different jazzy vibe, and some people prefer that more. But it feels like, recent interpretations of this song like to mix different parts of Stardust Speedway together. But this is the song from the Japanese soundtrack, I think.
Yeah, that's no contest. Like, I think all 3 songs, I'm not a huge fan of Good Future Stardust Speedway, actually. I don't think it's bad. It's just, I don't know, Present and Bad Future are 10,000 times better.
For sure.
Which makes me want to mess up this stage specifically. And yeah, this song rules. Following that, critical track number 4, let's go with one more stage song. This is Metallic Madness, Present.
Clear is listening because that enemy is going
Once more, this was composed by Naofumi Hataya. This is the music for Round 7, described as Robotnik's base of operations on the little planet. I'm gonna assume that's Casey Rankin again, that you could hear in the clip.
Probably, I'm gonna guess. The credits on these soundtracks weren't the best. There weren't official OSTs released at the time, and even then, there was like a 2011 special Sonic 20th Anniversary edition of this soundtrack released, primarily of the Japanese soundtrack, but even then, not full, complete credits there, so it's still a little bit of a toss-up, but yeah, I'd guess so.
Yeah, you can basically tell who composed which track, and that's about it, and who was involved overall. But I really like this song because of its sort of hectic feeling to it, and like, if you're running through Robotnik's base of operations, like, this is the place, this is the end, you made it to the stronghold, that fits. But like this really, really cool, hectic piano piece with like these almost industrial drums behind it. It's super cool, and I really, really dig the sort of vibe and tone that this song presents.
It's such a good final track as far as like starting the approach to the bass. Like, you know, we're in there, we're on that final level. Love the intensity here. The vocals here are really cool. Can't really make out what they're saying, but it does give a good energy to it. And I think this is a great pick. You'll hear in the US soundtrack, I have a Metallic Madness selection as well. And of course, Metallic Madness, something that would be brought forward into Sonic Mania. So there's that. But a very different approach on the US soundtrack. And it's really cool to hear this one being like, all right, you know, let's start. Let's take him down. Taking down Robotnik.
Yeah, it's a very determined and cool track. And lastly, critical track number 5. It's the credits theme. This is Cosmic Eternity, Believe in Yourself.
Nothing to do if you gotta do something. You gotta do something. Believe in yourself. Yourself. Hey!
Extraordinary things can happen if you believe in yourself.
Once more composed by Naofumi Hataya, vocals again by Keiko Utaku and Casey Rankin. If you are more familiar with the US soundtrack, yes, that's right, they got a separate credits song in Japan and Europe, whereas we got basically a second version of Sonic Boom. Honestly, I don't think it's as interesting as You Can Do Anything, because it's not as weird. It's not nearly as weird, but I do think that it fits super well for like the ending of a game like this, and it fits well with the sort of tone of the stage music, if that makes sense. And also, I didn't actually catch this. The main riff of the song is actually the Level Clear jingle, which is super rad. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's, I think, one of the better parts of the Japanese soundtrack, but, you know, we weren't going to include just a little few second ending little bit, but you compare the two ending jingles and it's the Japanese version blows the American away. It's not even close. But then you get to hear it here in the ending, and it's like, oh, that's kind of where it comes from. Like, it's such a good energy vibe to it. Ah, man, I just love the intensity and the instruments there, and just how brief it is. Just a nice little snappy bit there. But yeah, great vocals from Utoku and Casey Rankin. Yeah, it's not the nonstop going again. It's kind of energy of You Can Do Anything, but it's more vocals from him, and it's good to hear these two kind of pair up, even though it'd be kind of short-lived to just this game.
Yeah. But again, like, You Can Do Anything is so weird that I find it more memorable. It's bizarre. But I do think this is a really, really good song. And I kind of, for some reason, when I was looking into this, I got the idea that, like, the US version kept this song at least. No, it did not.
Mm-mm.
So that's a shame. For tracks of the cutting room floor, Peter, you got a couple. Hit me.
Sure, I do. Let's go with the first song you hear when you start playing the game, and that would be Palm Tree Panic, Present. Palm Tree Panic is, of course, round 1 in the game. This song is composed by Naofumi Hataya, and the level is described as a tropical level with mountains and waterfalls in the background. It's the lush greenery that you would expect to start a Sonic game, that's for sure. But right from the get-go, you immediately hear the difference in audio quality and the music that is presented in the game when you compare it to Green Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog to this. This is clear next generation. This is leaps and bounds way better. Even if it's just like the little vocal samples with the woo and yeah and little applause and all that, like it just gets you right in a positive mindset immediately with great sounding synths. The energy is there. It's perfect to start your game playing experience, and then what happens with Good and Bad Future is from there. But for a baseline, wow, what an introduction.
Palm Tree Panic, just in general, all 3 songs for it. Good Future actually narrowly missed being in the Critical 5 because I really, really dig that song. This song also gives me a Kirby vibe.
Yeah.
Like for a Kirby Island level. And of course, we'll talk about Bad Future shortly. But yeah, no, I really, really love the vibe that both Present and Good Future have of just this, this tropical feeling and using all of the instruments that you expect from a tropical song now. And I think it is interesting that it does sound very much like a song I could hear being in one of the original Sonic games, but just instrumentally impossible to be on a Genesis. Which it does feel like a flex, honestly. And that's kind of neat.
Absolutely. So yeah, putting it right at the front, great decision. The other one for me on the cutting room floor for this Japanese version of the soundtrack is Boss. Probably another song that, if you are familiar with the Japanese soundtrack in Sonic CD, that you are familiar with. Because what other song starts out with... Boy, this song that plays during boss battles against Robotnik is just pure chaos, and I love it. It is composed by Naofumi Hataya, and another track that has these vocals in it that some YouTube commenter had kind of tried to transcribe a little bit, but like this main bit of this, work that sucker to death, work that sucker to death, come on now. It's just such a cool beat that goes to it, and yeah, nothing like calling someone a sucker in the 90s. That's fitting. But then even like, the war begin, earth tremble and fear you, bold, brainy, and cold-hearted. The distance grows closer, little by little. Wow! The power you possess is incredible. He doesn't stand a chance. It's such English language in a Japanese soundtrack, but it works here, and it's unlike the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like the kind of music that you're used to, at least so far early in Sonic the Hedgehog's life cycle. Just totally different, next level, what's possible on a CD-ROM.
If I had to answer the question of what is the most 90s video game song you've ever heard in your entire existence, I think this might be the answer.
I mean, that's a contender at least.
Like, just the beat alone is like, huh, I've been transported back to 1995. I can't say 93, I was 1. But, you know, it's just, when I think of the 90s, it's stuff that sounds like this. And I love it. And it's so weird. And as we covered with You Can Do Anything, when it's super weird, I kind of dig it. For me, my 2 tracks of the cutting room floor, I mentioned we talk about Palm Tree Panic Bad Future, so let's do that now. This was composed by Naofumi Hataya. I'm going to be my stereotypical self and say this is actually my favorite version of Palm Tree Panic, but the reason Good Future almost made it is because I think it fits more to do like the tropical feeling to it. Because, you know, that's all gone in this version of the song because, as it is described, the bad future of Palm Tree Panic is completely mechanized with smog in the air and oil in the water. So we kinda ruined the beach and now everything kinda sucks and is evil, and this song has changed to reflect that. Basically all of the tropical feeling instrumentation is gone and replaced with more electronic sounding stuff, and I think it is super cool.
It is definitely very cool. In the US soundtrack, it's like a tribal sort of group of people that is like disappointed in you in a way with like low sounding bongos and things like that. But this one just keeps up that energy that you kind of actually hear reflected in Stardust Speedway. Bad Future as well, the doon and like it's really symbolic of like Robotnik and his mechanized systems have taken over and you done goofed.
It's really, really cool, and I think probably the best of the Bad Future tracks to just be like, yeah, no, it's different now and like way worse for everything. And I really dig that.
And it's got to like, emphasize that early on, right? Like you got to make sure for players, like you don't want to get the Bad Future. You'll feel bad. You'll have a bad time.
Following that, I have one other Bad Future to talk about because, again, I'm just going to be basic. Bad Future tracks are a lot of my favorites, honestly. This is Tidal Tempest Bad Future. This one, he finally gets to be on the list again. Composed by Masafumi Ogata. This is the music for the Bad Future of Round 3, which is described as an underwater area at the base of a volcano. The Bad Future shows a broken down, polluted, over-industrialized water plant. And most of what I can say here is kind of the same I said about Palm Tree Panic Bad Future. It's not as much of a complete departure from the other 2 tracks as Palm Tree Panic is, but I think it still has the same sort of effect of like, yeah, everything sucks now. Oops. And I really like it.
And I feel like you're hearing it kind of represented here by we're twisting with the synths. What can we do? Like, throw some of them out of tune. Okay, just make them sound a little more grating to listen to. All right, and this is all possible because we can then record it and then master it and put it on a CD. So definitely reflected in the instrument choices for sure.
Yeah. So what will I never forget about the Japanese soundtrack? I assume we'll do the what will we never forget about the game later, even though I'm pretty sure the answer is the same for both of us. It's Stardust Speedway Bad Future. That song is so good. And I'm really happy it was in Generations because I don't think I ever would have heard it otherwise because I didn't play Mania. And I'm really happy that song is in my life because it's so cool.
Yeah, if you're going to bring one forward, and I'm glad they did, that's the one. But it's things like when I was also learning about this one, that boss theme is like, oh, I've heard that one before. That's the weird start to it and all the lyrics to it. The like the level clear theme, just what a cool jingle. I mean, just amazing. And then Toot Toot Sonic Warrior, you can do anything is certainly a way to start the game.
Yeah, it's a cool soundtrack overall. I really dig it. So before we move on to the Yankee version of... Am I allowed to say that? Before we move on to our version, the one we got where we live, we are going to transition with a fan cover, a fan remix. Again, I just finished talking about Stardust Speedway Bad Future and how it's the best song in the game, so what other song am I going to get a remix of? This is one that is titled The Worst Timeline. And it is from YouTuber John Davis. That's Jahn Davis. I mean, it's a remix of Stardust Speedway. It's really, really good. So please enjoy that. And we'll be right back.
See, normally I would now talk about a whole other game entirely, but since we are focusing on Sonic CD and its other soundtrack, let's instead go and highlight the composer that we will focus on for the American soundtrack, and that is Spencer Nilsen. Spencer Nilsen was born on April 9th, 1961 in Novato, California. He started off playing piano when he was about 5 years old, and he says he is about 95% self-taught. Around age 13, though, he's hanging out at music stores in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's the 70s, and the business is booming out there for musicians, and he's tinkering around on synthesizers. And he's apparently good enough to be noticed and called in as a session musician. He said he was like going with his mom to The Plant, which is a studio where like famous albums like Fleetwood Mac's Rumors were being recorded. And like he's just there as a session musician on keyboard as a teenager. Crazy stuff. He ends up graduating with a film and TV degree from San Diego State University. And eventually he came back to the Bay Area and got connected to Walter Afanasieff, who is the husband of a high school friend that happened to hear his music on the radio. And this Walter guy's a producer, quote, who had just signed this 18-year-old girl named Mariah Carey. So,
Okay.
a mover and shaker in the business in the early 90s, and they get working on some commercial composition projects for Spencer. And then Spencer Nilsen gets cold called because some video game company called Sega is setting up their North American operations in the area. And Spencer Nilsen had no experience with console games. He was only barely aware of arcades, and even had the thought, like, do video games have music? Well, sure they do, because this Sega company is on the verge of transitioning their game development work onto CD-ROM. And so he started to work at Sega and composing music on some of their Sega CD games and Genesis games right before that transition. And then eventually he'd become the president of this Expression College for Digital Arts in Emeryville, California. And then he left and went and became co-chairman of the board of Music in Schools Today. He also found and owned a company called Illumina Studios, which is described as a full-service media design and production company. though its website is now a dead link. So I'm not sure if it's operational today, but he did that. He is currently a digital media specialist and educator at Sonoma Academy, which is a private college prep high school in Santa Rosa, California. He just released a new album, like within the last month, and he calls it Here and Gone. He's promoting it as available on his website at SpencerNilsen.com. SpencerNilsen.com. As far as hobbies and all that, he says, quote, he also loves to hike, camp, mountain bike, play music with friends, score movies and games, and create things with his hands and brain. Because on Spencer Nilsen's discography, he composed for games like Echo the Dolphin, Batman Returns, Sonic CD, Jurassic Park, The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin, Joe Montana's NFL Football, Echo the Tides of Time, and The Adventures of Batman and Robin. In his time at Sega, he would then continue to produce some Sega Saturn games like Cyber Speedway, and then he would go on and, do things in the educational space and in the kind of company production area. So left Sega at a certain time. So we're talking about two different soundtracks because this is kind of crazy. Sega of America delayed the North American release of Sonic CD for 2 months, specifically to have a new soundtrack written and produced by Spencer Nilsen and David Young of Sega Multimedia Studio, with select tracks written and produced by former Santana keyboardist Mark Sterling Crew. It wasn't too clear when this decision was made that, we need a new soundtrack. But one of the last North American development versions of Sonic CD contained the Japanese soundtrack completely intact. So it must have been done on a very short, compressed time frame. According to Nilsen, Sega's American marketing division believed it needed a more, quote, rich and complex soundtrack, as well as a theme song that they could use to promote it. Interestingly, the past versions of the stage songs are the same on both soundtracks. So the past tracks from the Japanese soundtrack are carried over and play on the American version of the game as well. They could not be replaced for the US soundtrack, as they were sequenced PCM audio tracks rather than the streamed mix mode CD audio. The way it was kind of described, and I could understand it, you could put the CD-ROM for Sega CD in a CD player, and it could play the music tracks for if they were in this mixed mode CD audio. But because the past songs were in this sequenced PCM version or type of file, you could only listen to them in the sound test of the game and not in a CD player. So they must at some point, just said, we're on a time crunch. Screw it. There's nothing we can do. And so watching playback, it sounds a bit different when you go back to the past in these the versions of the North American game. It's a different, just slightly different audio quality, a little bit crunchier and a little bit more overmodulated in a way. It just sounds slightly different. Just thought that was interesting. It's not every track that was changed. The past carries over from the Japanese and European soundtrack, but everything else changed.
It's super weird that just those would be in a different format, though.
Yeah, I wish I would be able to understand why that was the case, but it's just, that seems to be what it was. And this soundtrack change was very divisive. The magazine Game Fan had given the Japanese version of the game a 100% score, but then they re-reviewed the American release specifically to knock it down to a less than flattering score just because of the soundtrack change, calling it, quote, an atrocity that remains the biggest injustice in localization history. I don't know if that claim could live up today, but, at the time, what a thing to be angry about.
Persona 1 would like to have a word.
That would be for another few more years, after all. Anyway, Spencer Nilsen would say in a 2008 interview, quote, "I think critics were looking for a way to bash the game. It was like we replaced the music for Star Wars after the movie had been out for a while." And today, it's a big preferential debate for fans. It's totally subjective, though I saw a take that I like a lot, and I think I agree with, just kind of from an outside perspective, that this person thought that the Japanese version of the soundtrack is better to listen to alone, when you're just listening to the tracks by themselves. But the US version actually works better in contributing to the atmosphere while you're playing the game. So I could see that, and I can vibe with that.
I am squarely on the Japanese soundtrack side, mainly because I don't have the context and experience of playing the game. So I really could not say how well it fits the atmosphere or anything. So for me, it just comes down to, from what I heard of the American version, which we'll get to in a second, the Japanese version is kind of just overall better music, but it's not to say that I think the US version is bad or anything. It's just, Japanese is a little bit better.
I agree. I think I'm in the same camp, especially with the experience I've had playing the game. Just listening to these tracks back, to me, I prefer the Japanese one more, but you're absolutely right. It's not to say that the American soundtrack is bad. It's just different. And let's get to the critical tracks for the North American version of the Sonic CD soundtrack. Let's get to the first one. It has to be this main theme, and that would be Sonic Boom.
If you're strong, you can fly, you can reach the other side of the rainbow. It's alright, take a chance, 'cause there is no circumstance that you can't handle. When you use your mind, Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom, keeps you running faster. Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom, save the planet from disaster.
So while the Japanese version of the soundtrack got a 20th anniversary release, noting how the different composers worked on different tracks, the American tracks, no such luck, really. Although Spencer Nilsen in particular is credited with Sonic Boom, because this is the one song that has carried over from the American version as the main theme for the game. The rest of the tracks we're going to note as Spencer Nilsen et al. We don't know if he worked on it, whether David Young had any say in it, or if it were a Mark Sterling crew joint there. So when it comes to Sonic Boom, this was that marketing theme that they needed, and so as a result, it plays in the opening theme, it plays on the title screen, it's a leitmotif that returns time and again, it's even used in a different version for the ending theme. It was all about Sonic Boom, and so the music was written by Spencer Nilsen, with vocals performed by Pastiche, which is a female vocal group comprised of Sandy Cressman, Jenny Meitzer, and Becky West. It doesn't seem like they're a band, just like a vocal group from what I could gather. Sonic Boom got prominent because it returned as an unlockable music track in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and so as a result, a generation, us included, learned about this song and how hype it can be, especially in a Super Smash Bros. Battle.
Yeah, my first time hearing this song was your friend, my acquaintance, Alan, playing it on the show when you were talking about your favorite songs in the game when the soundtrack got uploaded. Somewhere, I don't remember where it would have been uploaded at that point.
Mega Upload? Something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, probably Mega Upload back then. But yeah, I think it speaks to this song's quality that it is now the theme of Sonic CD, despite the fact that it is on the US soundtrack, not the Japanese soundtrack. This song is the theme of Sonic CD. It's the one that came in Smash. It's the only American track on that 20th anniversary release.
Mm-hmm.
on which it also got a Crush 40 versus Cash Cash remix.
Yeah, I think it's telling that it's the one that you have to represent from this soundtrack. And you're right. I also do remember Alan being very hyped for
And from what I remember, he had never heard this song, so he was in the same camp as most of us, I think.
Yeah. And now he's running a competitive gaming team, doing big things with Panda Gaming. That's always crazy to think back on history and connections with different people. Love it. Oh my gosh. Thinking of you, Alan. Love you, and Sonic Boom. All right, let's get to number 2 on the Critical 5 for Sonic CD. This is Palm Tree Panic, Present. So from my cutting room floor track on the Japanese soundtrack to this here being a critical track, it's not saying one's better than the other. If I'm being totally honest, I actually prefer the Japanese version of this song more. But I feel like this is a good inclusion here because you're kind of presented with what did Spencer Nilsen have to work with? Or whoever did create this version of Palm Tree Panic Present. When you're introduced to Sonic CD and the first track that you hear when you're playing the game, for the first round, the present, right into it, how do you interpret this tropical level with mountains and waterfalls in the background? I think he does a great job, honestly. Like a lot of great instrument choices here, kind of like saxy sound that brings in like the main melody, but like these strummed instruments and a very, very tropical feel to it. I think it's a great interpretation. I just feel like the Japanese version is more Sonic-y mixed with tropical, and so I prefer that sound more, but I think this is a great take on it, and it's a good way of like considering all the time crunch and everything, like a great take on it.
I feel like it's both representative of why a lot of people think the Japanese version is better, but also like representative of, man, they sure didn't give Spencer Nilsen like any time to actually work on this soundtrack, huh? Because while it is, I think, a fine song, and I do agree that the instruments that are there are good, it doesn't feel quite as much like it's trying to flex on earlier Sonic games of being like, look what we can do with the music now.
Yes.
It kind of just feels like your average video game track. And I'm sure it was at least a little bit more impressive in 1993, but as it is, it's just like, yeah, but I've heard a million songs like this, and I don't really get that from any of the other tracks on the Japanese soundtrack.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, it's like, it's a flex on what was possible musically at the time, but just they had more time in Japan just to really take the time to create something new and special. And Spencer Nilsen is like, oh, what can I do with the limits in front of me? Here we go. We got great instruments at our disposal, but let's get it done.
Game goes gold in a month. Good luck.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Terrifying. Ugh. So we continue on to Quartz Quadrant and talk about number 3 on the Critical 5. Which track did I pick here? I like Bad Future. Quartz Quadrant, as we mentioned, is round 4 of 7. and it's a busy place with conveyor belts and platforms. It is an overly mechanized mine with apparently no quartz in the bad future.
They took all the quartz. All my quartz gone.
My precious quartz, no! Yeah, so with this one here, I really dig this one because it has a good range of like sounds here, starting with this kind of low, kind of subtle, like, especially when you start the level, like, oh, it's desolate, like everything's gone. And then it kicks in with these drums and you get this nice, I think it's like a C minor kind of vibe to it, which I love when like it kind of hits that chord. Always sounds so good. Kind of like a darker themed chord to it. And man, the guitars here at play, you also get some choral accents here as well. And that sounds so good together. And then the electric guitar sounds even better at the end of the clip. I think it's just got a lot going for it as far as like things are dire, especially they sound a little barren at the beginning, but then it's very 90s drums that kind of kicks into it. This was my preferred selection, though I feel like you can't go wrong with any Quartz Quadrant track.
I think of the songs on the Critical 5, I think this is probably overall my favorite. That bass part does a lot to carry it. It reminds me of a volcano level. I think it's the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
Like those feel like what I would hear in like a lava level or something. Again, like it sounds less like a flex, but I think this is just generally a pretty good song. Just overall.
How does one compete with Stardust Speedway, The Bad Future, though? Okay, Bad Future's a good take on the US soundtrack, don't get me wrong, but for my preference, number 4 on their critical track is actually Stardust Speedway, Good Future. Stardust Speedway, as we have represented before, it's round 6 of 7, a highway adorned with musical instruments above an enormous city. The Good Future looks like a giant futuristic amusement park with bright pink and green colors dominating the landscape with a beautiful cathedral in the center of Zone 2, as opposed to that Robotnik statue. I just like the instruments here. Again, I think it's a really good indication of we'll pull some good instruments together and make something out of it, but it's tough to compare it to, the Bad Future on the Japanese soundtrack. But the vibe of it, like it's really good representing, I think, running down a highway and the race that's involved, also with Metal Sonic. Just a cool one. Again, I like it, and it's good, especially, oh my gosh, considering the terrible limitations. It's just my preference leans toward the Bad Future in the Japanese version.
This is the song that plays in the anime RPG when the hero has arrived at the decisive moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you get that feeling too?
Oh yeah.
That's all I can think about when I hear this song. I mean, yeah, again, I like it, but like you said, how are you supposed to compete against Bad Future on the Japanese? You can't. You just can't. It's not a fair matchup. I'm very sorry, Spencer Nilsen. It's not a fair matchup, and you were screwed on that one.
But I can all at the same time imagine running down a highway, like running down a street, and like this playing as well. And so
yeah, I think this it has an American highway feel to it almost, which I guess fits.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a different interpretation of how to score this. And we'll wrap up the Critical 5 tracks here for the American version of the Sonic CD soundtrack with Metallic Madness, Bad Future. Metallic Madness is the final round. It's Robotnik's base of operations on the little planet. But in the bad future, Metallic Madness is a dark, sinister, completely broken down base, ruined from neglect. And yeah, you done goofed. Like, the world is screwed, especially in this final approach to the base. But you know what? Sonic's going to push through anyway, because that's the kind of hero he is. And while you should probably restart, or at least the game's going to tell you, hey, try again and go for the good ending, the fact that you're here and listening to this and still persevering shows the energy of not only the player, but then represented in the protagonist of Sonic as well. So it's fitting, I think, then, when you're trying to take the approach to the soundtrack, that maybe it's more representative of, like, let's take more of the visuals and kind of clue us in there. When things are bleak, when things are hopeless, I think that's represented well in the music. I like the back half of it, where it almost kind of gets more of like a Blade Runner cyberpunk aesthetic to it, where it's just like things are just like darker in the chords there. I like that a lot. Totally different, again, when you compare it to like Metallic Madness on the Japanese side of things, but I think more representative on the atmosphere in this track.
I think this is probably a very close second for my favorite of the Critical 5. Honestly, when I was listening through to figure out Cutting Room Floor tracks, because much like the Japanese version, where I had only ever heard Stardust Speedway, I had only ever heard Sonic Boom on this soundtrack. I had never heard literally any of these other songs. Today was my first time hearing all of them. This would have been on my cutting room floor if it hadn't been on Critical 5. This song is really, really good. And honestly, it's really, really telling to me that even the bad future of Robotnik's bass is, oh, even Robotnik is screwed. Oops.
Yeah.
And I think this song kind of really captures the sort of hopelessness pretty well, honestly, all things considered.
For tracks on the cutting room floor, Joe, you have a couple. Hit me with those.
So the first one I have is another entry from Quartz Quadrant, this one for The Present. So once again, as we said, round 4, place with conveyor belts, platforms. The appearance of this level changes drastically throughout each time zone, while being an active mine and partially a swamp in the present. I mainly picked this to be on the cutting room floor because this sounds like a song I would hear in Sonic now.
Oh, yes, 100%. I was actually just about to say, like, you could have played this in Sonic Adventure or Sonic Adventure 2, and I would have not been surprised at all. But yes, 100%. It's not necessarily to say that, like, they took inspiration from this, but it's like that, especially the like, you just get a feeling from that guitar part. 100%, yes.
Yeah, it sounds like Sonic Adventure 2 before Sonic Adventure 2, and that's just kind of neat. I find that interesting, and that's the main reason why it's here. It's also, a pretty alright song, but for the most part, it was just that sort of realization hitting me of like, oh, yeah.
Well, I'm glad that hit you too. Yeah, when you can make those point A to point B connections, whether they were intentional or not, that's always a neat feeling.
And let's talk about a level we actually haven't mentioned a single time this entire episode. My second track of the cutting room floor is Wacky Workbench Present. This level is round 5. It is just a factory level located in a canyon. And I mostly picked this song because this one, I think, sounds the most like a song from the Japanese version. It's got the vocal samples. It has the funk to it. It just sounds the closest, and I think that's very interesting that of all the levels to get that, it's Wacky Workbench.
I agree. That's a good point to note. And in case anyone hasn't noticed yet, all of the rounds are indeed alliterative. So Quartz Quadrant, Wacky Workbench. Sorry, Collision Chaos was left out, but we've got those repeating consonants there in alliteration.
A concept they stole from 1997's Donkey Kong 64. Please ignore that doesn't make sense time-wise.
Okay. All right. Well, I talked about the boss theme on my cutting room floor on the Japanese soundtrack, so I might as well on the American soundtrack. It's Boss. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we take a hard left swerve into nightmare fuel? Because while this is the boss battle against Robotnik, the Japanese version, may have had some fun, wacky chaos to it. This feels like horror. I compare it to the Gigas fight in Earthbound, where you're getting these terrifying sounds, and let's make use of stereo panning and slowed down samples and to the point where a lot of YouTube comments were like, this terrified me as a kid and scared me so much. And it's like, okay, I can see that. Totally different track, but had to represent the difference for this track in particular.
Yeah, this is chase music from a Resident Evil game. What the hell?
So Spencer Nilsen, kudos for making something entirely different. It's super cool, but not what you'd expect from a Sonic game. Oh my goodness. And then the other one on the cutting room floor for me is Tidal Tempest, Good Future. This catchy little ditty goes with Tidal Tempest, which is round 3 of 7, and it's an underwater area at the base of a volcano. In the good future, Tidal Tempest is a fully operational turquoise aquarium harboring many plant life and fish. The water level appears to have risen over time. It's low in the past, higher in the present, and it's at its highest in either future. And in this good future, it's all positive and fun and happy. I got the impression that maybe I've heard this before, because it feels like an educational program in the 90s could have borrowed it and used it. Hey kids, did you know that dinosaurs lived this, so many thousand years ago? Wow, that's so neat, isn't it? And it's just it has that kind of that kind of positive educational TV program in the 90s, and that's just the impression I got. It's not this is great for Sonic, but I just feel like I've heard it in that kind of context before.
I kind of like the more chill vibe this song brings, especially if it's you're running through an aquarium, essentially. Aquariums are chill, as long as you're not sitting right next to the penguin enclosures splash zone. Do those have those? I don't know. I haven't been to an aquarium in over a decade.
The Detroit Zoo has a penguin exhibit, but it's just a big bubble where you gotta watch 40 penguins just kind of doing their own thing.
That sounds like penguins. But I like that it has that sort of laid back, it has this almost pretty feeling to it, which fits an aquarium. Yeah, I kind of dig that it sounds a little bit different from what I would expect in Sonic. I think you're right on the money with an educational program. I would go even farther and say I could hear this song showing up in a musical skit on Sesame Street. So yeah, that's where my brain goes when you bring that up.
Especially in a good future too, where you're going through the aquarium and there aren't any enemies because it's the good future and there aren't really any dangerous sort of pitfalls or anything like that. It just has that kind of feeling to it. So, an interesting format for this episode as we talk about Sonic CD. What will I never forget about the game? I think you're right. I'm going back to it. Like, it is Stardust Speedway Bad Future in the Japanese version, but also good memories with Sonic Boom. So I think really interesting to learn about both soundtracks, the conditions under which they were created, and which do we like more? I think we kind of made it pretty clear, but I think, our preferences lie with, the Japanese version and how some of those tracks sound. But I totally vibe with the impression of like, if you played the game, the atmosphere may vibe more with the American version, and maybe so that's the kind of compromise there. I think both are really impressive works of art, especially under the conditions that Spencer Nilsen and his team created this soundtrack under such short notice. But wow, just an interesting game to talk about overall. Thank you to DVD Smith for the idea, because I don't think we would have ever brought it up in this kind of comparison context.
Yeah, I don't know how we would have done it, but I assume we would have just covered the Japanese soundtrack just on its own. So yeah, I think this was a neat, I don't know if there's any other game on Earth we'd be able to do this kind of format with.
Yeah, I have no idea.
But I think this was interesting overall.
Very cool indeed. So that will do it for us. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's an MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. It's where Joe's other podcast, Smash Your Pieces, is hosted, and you can find Smash Your Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a podcast feed with episodes and all of that, but we also have a Spotify playlist, where if we talk about a video game track and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to this big monster playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
So the 20th anniversary release is on Spotify. That appears to be the only Sonic CD thing that is on the service. So that's just the Japanese and Sonic Boom. Sonic Boom's on there too. But as far as I can tell, the rest of the American soundtrack is nowhere to be found. So it's pretty much just going to be the Japanese soundtrack plus Sonic Boom.
Sounds about right. Who knows what kind of rights are all tied up in that other version of the soundtrack. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. You can leave some feedback for us, some suggestions on how we're doing these episodes, also suggestions for games to cover. We'd like to do that to round out our 2022 outline with, games moving and shifting around. I know I had a game that I was planning to talk about in a couple weeks. I'm like, nope. An announcement of sequel happened for later in the year, so let's move that to the end of the year. So it's always still in flux, but we'd love to get your suggestions. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Nao Shiraki.
I will be talking about Ryoma Nakamura. Oh, it's going to be a fun writer-themed episode next week for sure.
Uchikoshi is a weird dude.
He sure is. So let's talk about some Uchikoshi games, because, video game releases and all that. All right, to play us out, I figure, there's got to be an OC remix album of Sonic CD songs, and you know what? There is. It's called Temporal Duality over on OC Remix, and in particular, you got to do a remix of Sonic Boom, right? So the remixer named Dusk, D-U-S-K, did a punk, or as he called it, a super peel out remix of Sonic Boom, super peel out being a move that you can do in the game, and he titled it A World in Motion. So shouts out to the OC Remix album, Temporal Duality for Sonic CD. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.